C2C call. The purpose of these calls is to connect communities in newly fire affected disaster areas with people who have some experience and have been there and set up systems that we think could be of service. Today's call is actually in two parts. The first part is featuring Letitia Hankey, and she has a lot of accomplishments. So I'll get to those in just a moment. And so part one, about 30 minutes, is going to be, how do you actually meet the community where they're at, train people that are already in your community in order to do the work that becomes skilled labor. And we love the Lime Foundation that Letitia runs and has founded, and we also admire the fact that she is a builder and she's a business owner, and she's been in this business a long time. So I'm going to give you some more details about that. And in part two, which will be about 30 minutes, will be Alma Bowen, another grantee from Rebuild North Bay. We're so proud to support both of these very strong, innovative, effective women. Have to point that out. Yeah, Alma. Alma came to me about 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, and after 17 years of being a dispatcher with the county of Sonoma, she decided after the 2017 fires that she was going to take her deep well of knowledge and experience and turn it into a mission of actually helping vulnerable communities learn about, how to prepare for and respond to disasters in ways that are bicultural, bilingual. And she also does seniors. So she hit like two of our favorite areas. And so we've done a lot of work with Alma, including during COVID. So, but we're going to go ahead and start off today with Letitia. So Letitia Hankey is from Lake County, which, if you know anything about Rebuild North Bay, you know that we have a special place in our heart and our organization for Lake County. Very rural. It's actually the most under-resourced county in the state of California, yet it sits right above two of the wealthiest places, Sonoma and Napa. There's a tremendous amount of competence in Lake County that people overlook sometimes, but like a real, very, very rural, very self-sufficient. There's 67,000 people in that large county, so they are dear to our heart. We love the fact that they produced Letitia. It's like an extra bonus, the entire story for us. She wanted to be have a musical career, but instead she went to Sonoma State and she thought she'd be in recording and performing arts. But then she took a position at a roofing company. And this is everything about life and how life will hand you what you need when you need it. And she ended up managing that business for 8 years. In 2004, she started her own roofing company, Alternative Roofing Solutions, that serves, and Sonoma Napa Marin Seamless Gutters, now known as ARS Roofing, Gutters and Solar. In March 2021, she celebrated 25 years in the industry. It's a pretty big deal. She employs 24 full-time, year-round employees servicing the North Bay. So there are so many awards that she's been offered that I would take the 30 minutes to actually list them all out. So we do have a copy of her bio, so you can go ahead and look at that. A big part of the reason why Letitia came to our attention is that we were very concerned post-disaster about our need to rebuild, and that we didn't have enough housing to bring people in to do it. And we also really wanted to sort of help people who were not in the skilled trades industry pivot to learn that trade, because it really is a wonderful path to a very middle class life, an entry into actually a different level of income and security. So she has the Lime Foundation, which I'd like her to talk to us about. And I'm hoping that, Letitia, you can sort of help them understand not only your fire story, because it's something we all share, but your mission and your vision for your foundation and also your business. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much. I will go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Thank you very much for that warm introduction. I'm really happy to be here today because, pretty much everything that I built through my nonprofit had to do with the fires. So I thought maybe I would first kind of tell you a little bit about my history and why the Next Gen Trades Academy actually came about. So, as you know, I'm from Lake County. I was born in Berkeley, but my parents moved me and my brother up to Lake County when I was 5 years old. So I've been up there a very long time, and I graduated from school there, and I have property there. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in. And as you know, you probably are aware that we had the 2015 Valley Fire, and that is the same year that I actually started my nonprofit. We were starting the nonprofit because I'm a musician and I wanted to start my arts program to help young people, with arts and things. But we also had this component of the Next Gen Trades Academy, and we weren't sure what we were going to do with it until this fire took place. This fire, my parents were evacuated. They were living in their truck up in Clear Lake at the Walmart. Friends that I grew up with my whole life, teachers, everyone that I knew most of my life, either lost homes or were displaced. And I started this Facebook page called Help Lake County, and whole community came together to help bring up, goods and sleeping bags and stuff for people for months. And that's when kind of my Next Gen Trades Academy came alive, because I realized that, we were going to have to, someone was going to have to help, rebuild homes, but I still wasn't quite sure how to put it all together. So it still took another couple years for it to actually come to fruition, because 2017 Tubbs fire affected me here where I live in Santa Rosa. And I had some of my employees lost their homes. They were displaced. I had them living in my office, and also where I lived, we didn't get evacuated. So I had, my employees and their families in my home. I got them hotels, and that's when it started really saying to me that I need to do something. What can I do? I was really burnt out after the 2015 one, because I had gone so much with that one. But I was like, well, what do I do with this one? So that's when things really started coming together, and I realized, okay, I know that we can do something about this. And then once the 2018 Kincaid fire came through, I said, okay, this is it. So 2017, we actually started our program called the Next Gen Trades Academy. We did our first class that year. And then the fire happened towards the end of the year, towards October. So we had several students graduate from this program. Right now, we put it on Zoom because it wasn't in person. It was an in-person class, and then COVID turned it into a Zoom class. But it ended up being a good thing for us to turn it into Zoom, because we were able to now do the program in many different areas besides just right here in Sonoma County. So what is the program? This is the curriculum. We're basically just taking young people out of either high school, or maybe they've gone to college and dropped out, or maybe they don't want to go to college, or maybe they're just simply lost and don't have an idea what they want to do in life at all. And we're introducing the trades to them. That is that simple. It's ages 16 to 24. And over on the left, you'll see all the trades that are right now that are part of our program. It goes from carpentry to landscaping and so on. And we introduce them to these different trades, and then we bring in local contractors that are hiring or are mentors in the program, and they come in and they speak to the students and tell them how they got into the industry. Of course, I get to tell my story of how I was 20 years old when I was, a receptionist for a roofing company. I was in college, but I was broke. And I ended up dropping out of college, and I was working at this roofing company. And over 8 years, I went from just being the receptionist to the office manager, to the manager, to the field supervisor, learned how to roof, and then went and got my own license 8 years after that. So we teach a lot of these young people that they can either start off in this amazing career in the trades and either work their way up into supervisor roles, or they can start their own companies. We do incorporate a lot of different components in that course as well, because a lot of our young people are dealing with a lot of stress. So we do a lot of stress management courses in the classes to kind of teach them what are some of the exercises they can do on a daily basis to help with their stress levels. We do an interview and public speaking course, so that way they know how to interview properly, especially if you're going to interview by Zoom. You got to look into the camera, not over here. So we do a lot of courses on teaching them how to do that properly. literacy, resume, cover letter, financial literacy, which is also very important as well. If, you know, they're going from jobs that were making $14 an hour to jobs that are now $25 an hour, we're teaching them how to be able to put money away and have better financial freedom when they get older. And then we also talk about health and nutrition, because a lot of our young people are eating, you know, Doritos and popping Red Bulls all day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we're trying to teach them a little better about brain health and how that also helps with their stress level as well. Now we have this class, we're teaching them about education and the trades. What's the next step? Getting them hired. So we've been able to get our students hired in these following counties so far: Sonoma, Marin, Napa, Solano, and now Santa Clara County. We're working with them on a program to start this coming fall. And it's been really, it did more than I thought it was going to do. I was like, yeah, let's help a few students. Now we've had 185 graduates since 2017, and 77% of them have been hired and working full time right this moment. And some of them have been with companies now for 4 years or more, because we've been around for over 4 years now. So it's very rewarding to know that we were able to help a situation that was already dire, which was the workforce in construction before the fires. But now we're able to help these contractors be able to have a workforce to pick from. I mean, I can speak from my own self as a roofing contractor, or in solar and everything. We have a hard time finding people that want to be roofers. And what I learned through this process is that the problems that a lot of our young people just don't know. They don't know about the opportunity. They don't know about these trades and how they can have these great careers. And so that's all we're really doing, is just opening the doors for them to another option. You know, if it's not college, then maybe there is another option for them. And that's generally all we're really doing. And what has been able to help with the rebuild here in Sonoma County, especially, is that now these contractors that are backlogged, you know, for so long, and some of us are backlogged for months and some are backlogged for years. Now that we have a workforce that we're training, we're able to play catch up, because we're playing catch up. It seems like constantly we're playing catch up, and that's what we're able to do. And so that's what our program's doing. So I wanted to show you a little bit more about the program. Our students go off and they graduate. We do 2 graduations per year. And right now we've been doing them as drive-by graduations just to stay safe from COVID. But normally we do an in-person graduation where they get their hard hats and get all of their goodies. And it's really fun and rewarding for them. At the end of their graduation, meaning once they pass the course, there are definitely stipulations for them to pass the course as far as participation, getting all the classwork done. They have to pass their OSHA certification. It's a 10-hour OSHA for safety. So they have to pass that as well to graduate from the program. And then they get, you know, gloves and tools and hard hats, their uniforms, plaques, and everything. That's all a part of the program and their graduation. Here are a few of our students getting their tools. These tools were donated by a special person in the community, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But you know, these tools alone cost $600. So you have to imagine an 18, 19-year-old that, you know, maybe are working part-time, or maybe they're working full-time but still not making enough money to just go out and buy $600 worth of tools. And when they graduate from the program, they leave with everything that they need for any trade, basically, that they start. Our mentorship program, also, we do our tiny home builds. So this is one of our general contractors that comes in to describe to them what trusses are, you know, how to actually build, what it looks like. And then they actually get to go and do it with our tiny home builds. And we actually build tiny homes for our homeless youth. So that's what we're doing here in Sonoma County. And right now we have one station up in Windsor and another one down in Roanoke Park at this time. And then we'll continue on the rebuild or the build of a tiny home probably in another few months. We're probably going to wait until the fall to restart again. But this is one of our students, Marcel, working on a tiny home. And it's nice because they actually get that hands-on experience. Some of our students that graduate are ready to just go and start working for contractors full-time the minute they graduate. Others are just like, I'm still not really sure. So we put them on our tiny home because that gives them a chance to really get into it a little more and kind of decide what they want to actually go into for a career. And when they finish the tiny home, then we're able to secure a job for them on the career that they want to go in. This is Ben, who graduated from our program about a year ago. He said, well, I want to build my own tiny home. And sure enough, he started building his own tiny home by himself. His dad's been helping a little bit, but Ben's been doing it on his own with some guidelines. We have a floor plan for them to follow, and he was definitely one that excelled in that. So he's almost finished with it, if you can see over there in the corner. This was one of our students that graduated about a year ago from Rancho Cotati High School in Roanoke Park. He said he wanted to go into HVAC his first day of class. His last day of class, he said, I want to go into HVAC. And sure enough, about 30 days out of the class, he got hired with More Home Services, is one of the larger companies around, and he got hired. And he sent me this picture a few weeks ago showing me that he's running his own crew after only a year with the company. So I'm very excited about that. And then lastly, one more story here. We had two students that graduated from high school. One student got a scholarship for $300,000. It was a full ride scholarship. And he decided that he actually, after taking our class, wanted to go into solar. And he gave that scholarship to the runner up and decided to work for this solar company instead. And the two of them were together. So this is Bradley. And 2 years ago, they graduated from high school and decided that they wanted to go into solar. And sure enough, they started working with the solar company. That's one of our mentors. And they've been with them now for a little over 2 years. And it's just great for you to hear the stories, how, they're the ones that are rebuilding. I mean, solar right now, we have to put solar on everything that's new construction, and they're doing it. They're the ones doing it. And these are the young people that we have to get more into this type of workforce. And hopefully you can see that is happening. A couple little quick fun stuff that's helped really kind of catapult our program. Kelly Clarkson heard about our program, Line Foundation, and she had us come on her show last year. It was COVID, so we had to do it by Zoom, but it was really nice to have that recognition. And she just highlighted our whole program on her TV show. You can see that on my website. And then Mike Rowe is the one who gave us, if you know who Mike Rowe is, he's the one who gave us the tools. He came and surprised us last year, this whole big shebang that he did. It was a huge surprise. I literally had no idea this was happening. And he showed up, and at the end of it all, he surprised us with a grant and also a bunch of tools, almost $100,000 worth. So that way we can give these students these tools when they're finished with the class. So it's been a really great, opportunity for us to do this program. And this was our way of giving back and finding a way to rebuild our area. And luckily now we're at that point where we're branching off into other areas so we can find other young people to, get into construction and help other areas as well. So thank you guys very much. If you have any questions, I'm totally available for questions.
Thank you, Letitia. Julie has a question. Julie, go ahead.
Hey, Letitia, how are you? So, in addition to being part of After the Fire, I'm actually an architect and an interior designer. So, and as a woman in the field, kudos, 25 years. That's awesome. I've been 35 years in this, so it's a whole other world. Up here in the Rogue Valley, I think really very quickly we recognize that workforce is a huge issue for us. It had been before the fire. It's even more so now. We do have a bunch of programs that are starting or trying to sort of get off the ground, both with our Rogue Community College. The Medford Urban Renewal Agency actually bought a giant warehouse that they're going to turn into a trades center for kids 16 to 24, which is fantastic. We've also got a lot of high schools who are trying to re-up their trades and vocational education. And then we're also really trying to engage the architects and the builders. My question for you is, what was the biggest stumbling block, and or where was it sort of where the dam got loose or got let loose and things really started happening as far as your connection either to public entities or to sort of the building community? Because those are the two that we haven't jumped on yet completely. And it's more just because there's so many other things going on, but I really want to see where we might want to push a little bit more. Is it the building professionals, or is it more of the public sector?
You start with the building professionals. Once you have them in line, because I had 12, and they were the first, before I did anything, I started it but I didn't do anything until I actually met with the contractors. And they were contractors that I had a relationship with. So if you have a relationship, right, you start with those first, and you get a buy-in from them and say, hey, what would happen if I started this program where I can train these young people that you can hire and train the way you want them to be treated? It was a no-brainer at that point, because for me in my industry, when we're trying to hire a roofer that has experience, they come in with bad habits and bad attitudes. I know everything, you can't teach me anything, and they end up being worse than what I thought it was going to be. But now we've hired 4 of our graduates over the last 3 years, and now we've been bringing in these graduates that know nothing at all, right? But we're training and teaching them, and now they're moving up, and now I'm able to move up my team that I already have. And so it's kind of a win-win at that point. And that's what happened with these contractors. They realized the same thing. Once they hired one of the graduates and taught them, then they were able to move up some of their other employees. And that's why it's like this great cycle. So start with that first. But as an obstacle, it was always funding. As a nonprofit, you can't do this for free. We're offering it for free to our participants, but you got to pay the instructors and all the stuff that you're getting. So that was our biggest obstacle, and continues to always be the biggest. But now we've got people that are actually sponsoring participants. So if you put together a nice package, people actually want to sponsor our participant into the program. So that's something that you might want to consider, letting people know. But you got to have the contractors first. Yep. Or there's just you can educate about roofing and solar and stuff, but unless they're getting hired, I'm just like, well, what's the point of just educating them about it? That's exciting, but they want a new career. So as long as they know that they're going to take that next step and put as much energy as to getting them hired that they did, teaching them, that's just as important.
So 2 other quick questions, and then I'll let Tom talk. Sorry, I apologize. One, have you made connections with either your community college for like actual official certifications and sort of additional education for trained professionals? And 2, we heard about a program, I think it's in Paradise, that's going to be starting, that's actually a mobile training unit that's going to go out to communities and try and engage the young people in like, let's build a little ADU right here, and we're going to teach you, these 10 skills or something like that. And I just wasn't sure if you've heard about any other programs like that.
I haven't. So I know here in our area, like the Santa Rosa JC, they had some type of roofing apprentice program, but I've been looking for them for the longest time, because I'm like, I would hire from that program, but I'm not seeing where the students are actually coming out of that program. So that's the only certification I know. I know they're also starting like a construction certification program, but none of our students are going through any kind of major certification or anything besides their OSHA safety, and they're literally getting hired. Our contractors don't care about any certifications or anything. They just want them to show up. Every time we ask them that question, they ask, what's the number one, thing that you look for in a new employee? We're like, we just want you to show up. That's really the only thing. So yeah, there's not a lot of certifications that, we're requiring or any of our contractors are requiring. And that mobile thing sounds kind of cool.
Thank you. Tom, what was your question?
Well, I guess I have a couple. One is you're to be commended for this. This is incredible. I have a grandson that's in the trades out of high school, and I'm just very proud of him. And I think what you're doing is just great.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious though, if you know what sort of a percentage of your graduates are actually working for contractors now as part of the fire recovery. That's one question. And the other is, with the legalization of marijuana, I don't know if you've had to incorporate that into your health training, just to keep kids kind of from falling off.
Not high on the job.
Right. So it's not in our health training, but it's part of our stress management training. So our the lady who teaches that program, she specifically goes into, like drug use and marijuana, because not unfortunately, but contractors, they actually do drug testing, and some of these young people weren't able to get hired because of it. So she does actually address that part of our stress management portion. And there's only so much we can do. Some contractors don't drug test, and some do. So it's just like a hit or miss situation, especially around here. So it's just one of those things. We talk about it, and we talk to them about other ways to deal with stress. Ultimately, it's going to be their decision, but we do reiterate, that some contractors will. One of our students missed out on. I don't know if you know Kendall Jackson Winery or Kendall Jackson Wine. They had an amazing maintenance program available, and they wanted to hire one of our graduates for the program, but our graduate couldn't test clean. He couldn't test clean. They said, listen, take a break for a couple weeks, take a break, and then come back and retest. Still didn't pass it. So he couldn't even take a break for 2 weeks. So, there's only so much we can do, at that point. And then I forgot your first question. Or was that your first question?
No, just what percentage, if you know, of your graduates that might be working on a fire recovery in Sonoma or Napa counties?
So I don't know as of now, but in 2019, 100% of them were working on all fire rebuild. Every contractor that had hired our students were working on new homes in either this area or out in Napa County area as well. But now, as we went into 2020 and 2021, we started getting students hired out of area. So our numbers have changed. And so I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what they were for 2020 or for this year, but as of 2019, they were 100%. So we were very proud to be able to announce it. It was very exciting, and we keep track. We have a huge tracking system, and it's very exciting at that point. So it's still pretty high up there because we're all still rebuilding.
And reburning. Go ahead, Paula, you have a question?
And I like what Julie mentioned about it, the cannabis industry is sucking out the talent pool. I apologize if you mentioned this before, but how long is a session?
Great question. So we have our, when we did it in person, which is always been in person until COVID hit. So it's a 10-week course when we do it in person, because we have a lot of hands-on things that we do. But since we moved it to Zoom, I'm sure all of you know how we get Zoom brain. And then most of our young people are like doing class on Zoom. We shrunk it down to a 3-week course. And what we found out, this is our 8th class that we're on right now. And what we found out is that all the 8 classes that we've done on Zoom have received the same hiring results as we did in person. So we're literally having the same results, whether they're doing hands-on or not, they're still getting hired. So that's why we're going to continue with the Zoom. I mean, even through COVID, we're going to still do Zoom, but we'll also do some in-person classes, maybe twice a year.
So if I could ask on top of that, then what are the hours? So if it's a 3-week course, is this something full-time that's 5 days a week for 8 hours a day? Or is it something that they could also work a full-time job and do this in the evenings? Is there some flexibility for working and doing the course?
Yes. So right now, the class that we're in right this moment is specifically for Rancho Cotati High School. So they usually get out around 3:10. So this class is from 5 to 7, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we did a class right before that. It was Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays for 2 hours. It's just for 2 hours. We have a contractor. We have a trade per hour. So roofing will be at 5 o'clock and solar's at 6 o'clock. And then each class is a different trade, and that we find out their brains aren't like going to mesh, and it's been highly effective. So we're very flexible because some people are available during the day. So we have been able to do classes during the day, especially in the summertime. But we're very flexible as far as how many we can do and the times.
I may ask one last follow-up question. So if you're doing these on Zoom now, is there some type of a follow-up for smaller class size or outside distancing where they do get some hands-on before their graduation? I didn't miss that.
They're not right now, just
Okay.
for safety protocol. We're not doing anything hands-on. We will be starting the rebuild of the tiny home, tiny homes later in the fall. We're waiting to see how many people get vaccinated and all that stuff, right?
Okay.
So we are hoping to come back in the fall, and then we'll resume in-person classes next year. It won't be until 2022 that we resume in person.
Well, we are starting, sorry.
I think that one of the things that may not be common knowledge is that Sonoma County has remained in one of the most restrictive
Yes.
tiers possible until like
Yeah.
very recently. Like we were
Yes.
closed down for a full year. So we had a higher COVID rate of infection than most places.
That's correct. And we weren't able to put, we have to do our budget, right, for the year. So we have to think in advance. We're like, if COVID's going to be through 2021, then this. So that's why we budgeted for doing only Zoom classes. And now as we see COVID disappear, we can budget to do in-person classes next year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Letitia.
you.
Great job. And I think that one of the lessons, we're going to go into the next lesson with Alma, and I know you're welcome to stay on, or if you have to go, we understand, is that, we can take the talent that exists in our community in a multitude of ways, and then retrain it towards what the community needs. And that's part of a community-led design. You will find a tremendous amount of talent in your very own community. And our function is just to introduce you to cool people who've done good things at the right time that are helping us recover, because our recovery is actually taking all kinds of people and talent and motivations and missions. And so, Letitia, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate that. And with that, I'm actually going to turn to Alma Bowen. So Alma is, as I stated earlier, this is part 2. Alma is the founder and executive director of Nuestra Comunidad. She started that about a year after our 2017 fires. I'm sorry for my numbers earlier. She was actually a dispatcher for 18 years, not 17 years. I just got stuck in that 17. I've actually sat with Alma while she's told me stories of what it meant to be, there the night of the fire and be a dispatcher. We lost about 6,000 units in our first housing in our first night of our 23-day fire. So our dispatchers were very much in unprecedented territory, had to definitely meet the moment, truly heroically, I have to say. But she decided at that time that her skill set after 18 years being in that space could actually be put to a greater community use that was really needed, which is around serving the Latinx community in a way that we didn't do a very great job in 2017 in Sonoma County, and we still struggle. And we still have unmet needs. And so obviously we've been a supporter of Alma's, and then when COVID came, she's my go-to if I want something done right, in a way that will serve the Latinx community in a way that I know is actually bicultural and bilingual and relevant. And she's a medical translator. So during COVID, our county was delayed on providing information in Spanish and where they would put it. And so Sophie worked really hard on this too. So I just want to acknowledge that. We asked Alma to take over that function for the county for about 6 weeks, where she would do short videos, and it just allowed the county to sort of catch up. Like they needed a minute because it was traumatizing and confusing, and the information was confusing. But we wanted to make sure that the Spanish-speaking community was not sitting in fear week after week and getting information delayed a week later. Then the county was very smart. They were like, we're going to pick up Alma to do this next bid, and they did. So she has a lot of experience now in serving the Latinx community, the senior community. She goes into mobile home parks. She teaches them, how to be prepared. So I'm very proud to support Alma as an organization and as a human being. And thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. It's such an honor to sit in front of this space right now. I have become a lover of all of our fire survivors here in Sonoma County. Through different fires, I've gotten to know some of our fire survivors with Coffee Strong. I believe some of you may be familiar with them. I've presented to them several times around different topics, but bigger and more importantly, I've gotten to know them as human beings and their stories of recovery, which some of them are absolutely horrendous. You know, it's such a learning process. So I am going to attempt to share a video that kind of gives you a little taste. A little background, as Jen alluded, I was a 911 dispatcher for almost 20 years by the time I resigned my position. I loved my job. I actually loved my job. I was a communications training officer. When people got hired on, there was just 3 training officers, myself and 2 others. And the first 6 months of the dispatcher, the life of a dispatcher, they sat with one of us until they were able to be on their own. I thought I would retire from that job, and I always just felt like it was such a privilege to do that job. However, when Tubbs Fire hit us in 2017, I had just come home from working a shift as a per diem medical interpreter at our trauma center here in Sonoma County Memorial Hospital when my phone went off with a message that said, it was called an all hands message. In the 17 years at that time, I'd never seen that message go out. And I thought, and for a minute, who's the bubblehead up there that accidentally sent out this message, you know, because that meant basically like the proverbial S has hit the fan. And if you're not due the next operational period and you're not drunk at this time, you need to show up at the dispatch center because we're literally getting our butts handed to us. And so we always talked about this page, but we had never seen it because it really meant like all hell's breaking loose. And so when I first saw it, I thought somebody accidentally sent this, but I kind of had a feeling inside something crazy was happening. So I put my uniform on, kissed my husband goodnight, went off to work and told him I'll be back in a couple hours. I'm not sure what's going on. Well, I didn't come home for over 18 hours because I got there, I clocked in at 11 o'clock at night, and literally it was unprecedented, uncharted territory. We had no protocols in place for what we were hearing. We had thousands of calls, community members calling in. It was literally, I felt like it was straight out of a playbook that I'd never read before. You know, I felt like for the first time in 17 years, like a duck out of water. Thank God, as dispatchers, we get enough training in dealing with the unknown to at least put those skills to play and know that to trust our instinct and to trust everything that we've learned up to then, and, you know, and kind of go with that. So let me see if I can share a video that I think does a good job telling a little bit more of the story for you.
So Alma, I think it will work, but sometimes a video on Zoom doesn't work well. So we'll try it though. Go ahead though. Go ahead and try.
Okay. I don't think the speaker's working, is it?
It has nothing to do with you. It's a Zoom thing. But you know what we can do though is Sophie can send that out too. We can link it underneath the YouTube when we post it, and Sophie can send it out to people.
That'll be good. So I'll have you ladies send it out. That's a perfect idea. It's just a video that I feel really captures the moment. It was professionally done, and it has a little bit of background and imagery. So as you hear about the story of that night, you can actually see and hear what we were picturing. So after, like you said, the fire went on for days. It wasn't a one-night fire and then we're done. It kept going. And so as a dispatcher, coming back day after day, dealing with the system, one thing I learned right off the bat that night was the fire hit everybody the same. So whether you were in Fountain Grove, which is a more affluent area of Sonoma County, or in an area that was less affluent, The fire didn't care, disasters don't care. However, recovery looks a lot different for all of our community members. Not only does recovery, but access to information looks different, as Jen already mentioned. You know, access to resources during disasters looks different depending on what community you're from. And so as a dispatcher, I was in my dispatcher bubble, but I knew enough of what was going on outside to realize that our community was suffering beyond the actual disaster itself. And even though I was a trained medical dispatcher, I was trying to volunteer when I wasn't at work. First, I made sure, you know, that my husband and my family were okay. But then for that first month, because several of the dispatchers were impacted either emotionally, we had a few people that went out right away with trauma. They couldn't be in the center. They had to get professional help. It was traumatic for all of us, for everybody involved. Or some people actually lost their home. I was actually sitting the night of the fire next to a coworker of mine, and the stress we were all feeling that night was indescribable. Like, I just had never felt that kind of heaviness. I looked over at one point and he's crying, which seemed normal under that, because I sure wanted to cry, and I just didn't know how to handle it, other than you just keep moving, you know, you keep answering calls, you keep moving. And so I walked over, I was talking to somebody on the phone, but I walked over, I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he said, "My house just burned." And so there he was at the dispatch center. He just lost his home. He doesn't have a home to go back to. And so that was happening as responders and as dispatchers. We were also suffering in the disaster at that time as well. And so, you know, after I made sure my husband and my kids were okay and we got out of the area, because at that point we had no idea, the fire seemed to be everywhere. I continued to work. That first month I was there almost every day as much as I could be. On what little time off I had, I was trying to volunteer with the Red Cross shelter, because I was already beginning to hear reports back from the community, because I was already well connected to community groups, and I'd been doing outreach around 911 awareness for my whole career into vulnerable populations. I was hearing that people of, you know, Latinx community members were too afraid to go to the evacuation centers because they were afraid of ICE. They weren't being provided language services. They didn't feel welcome. There was all these things going on at the evacuation centers. And here I was trying to volunteer on my time off, but because I hadn't jumped through their loops, even though I was a trained medical interpreter, I couldn't volunteer to try to help connect some of those dots. So I started becoming very aware. Let me shut this door really quickly. I started becoming very aware of the disparities that were already happening. So that happened throughout the whole experience while the fire was going. After the fire passed, I had one day of a complete emotional breakdown, which as a dispatcher, in the 17 years I'd been there, if you knew me personally, I'm like this touchy-feely, emotional person, funny, goofy, weird, you know, whatever. But in the dispatch center, something would happen every time I walked through that door. There was like a different Alma that would appear, and it was like a level-headed, just like I was like a duck. My feet may have been going crazy underneath, but on the top, I was cool as a cucumber. And that's probably why I was so good for that position, because you don't want to be the freaked out person when somebody calls 911. You know, you can freak out after you hang up the phone, but when you're on the phone, you're the professional. But I was driving to work. They had certain roads shut down, so I had to take the long way around for about a month. The first time that they opened up what's called the Bicentennial Overpass here in Santa Rosa, I actually drove past a mobile home park that is for 55 and older. It was called Journeys in Mobile Home Park. It burnt down during our Tubbs fire, almost completely. Almost every home in that park was gone. That night of the fire, I took call after call after call from that park. For the 17 years prior to that fire, Journeys in Mobile Home Park was what we called a frequent flyer, or a daily call. There was not a day I worked that we did not get a call from that park. Simply because, you know, there was always medicals happening there. It's, you know, it was seniors, a lot of people with chronic conditions. So I felt like connection to this park that I didn't even know about. But the first time I drove past it and can actually see it, all of a sudden I'm driving my car and I can't breathe. I can't move. I am covered in tears, and I barely make it to our parking lot of my job, which is 2 blocks away from this park. I had to call my supervisor and say, I'm in the parking lot, but I can't come up. I can't make it up there. I had a complete and total emotional breakdown when I saw the devastation. Houses that had once been were no longer. It was rubble. It looked like a bomb went off. And all of a sudden I could hear the screams, the calls, the trauma that night. Up until then, I kind of had bottled into this nice little bottle with a lid on it, right? And when the lid came off, it all came flying out. And so even though it was a really difficult moment, I'm glad I had it, because in that moment, I really realized that there was a bigger mission, and that what I learned that night was important because there was a bigger job to do. And so my husband and I are the co-founders. We spent all of 2018 forming Nuestra Comunidad from scratch, from articles of incorporation, bylaws, building a board, hoping for funding, getting our 501c3, and literally feeling like we wanted to throw a party because the whole process took, it's quite the process. But also what it did is during that time, I was already doing the work. I was still a dispatcher, but on my days off, I started doing the work. I started taking class through FEMA. I started traveling to the Emergency Academy in Maryland. I started getting my hands on everything I could that I thought would give me all the tools I needed to teach the community how to become resilient, how to protect themselves, so that we would never have that same experience again. We've had more fires since, so it's just solidified my belief in the fact that disaster preparedness needs to look different. It needs to be accessible to everybody. One of my favorite projects was actually funded by Rebuild North Bay, and it was with a low-income senior facility where I went in and I did a series of 8 different disaster preparedness workshops. Everybody in my workshop was 70 years or older, low-income seniors. They got so into it that not only did we do disaster preparedness workshops, they were coming over and over. I'd see like new people, but then all the other people that had come before would come again. And I'm like, it's the same information. And they're like, I don't care, I really like it. And so I was like, fine, you guys can keep coming. So there was like this core group of like what became like disaster preparedness geeks, in this complex, but they formed what they called ROPE, which is a residents organized to prepare for emergencies. That we formed a committee. We gave them go bags, all through funded by Rebuild North Bay, and till COVID hit, and we're starting to want to do it again. They would not do Zoom. Now these people will move a building, but they will not jump on Zoom to save their life. They just do not want to deal with Zoom. But every Tuesday I was meeting with them. We had a list of priorities. I was setting up with fire departments to come in and teach them how to use their fire extinguishers. And we had a curriculum all mapped out. And this was then. By we, I mean, I would show up and say, what are we doing today? And they would tell me what we were doing. But that just showed me at any age, at any level, people want to be self-sufficient. Given the information and the support, they will do it themselves, and it empowered them. And these ladies still call to check on me, and as soon as we can, we'll be right back to it, because they're driven and they got a taste of being able to help themselves during a disaster. A lot of them, their family don't live in the area, they're alone. They felt like nobody would come help them or get them, and now they felt like they could actually take care of each other and themselves during a disaster. And with the Latinx community, I've continued to make sure that language access, like Jen said, that during when COVID hit, the county wasn't doing much of a job connecting at all with our Latinx community. And so we started making daily videos based on the information they were putting out in English, but we made the Spanish versions and we put them on social media. We, all of our partners were sharing them. And then about 6 weeks in, the county brought me on for several months to continue that work until they got their Office of Equity up and running, and they had their own people that could do those videos. I continue with disaster preparedness. We've also, an unforeseen role of Nuestra Comunidad has been in disaster response. We are often out at evacuation centers for language access, that component for advocacy. We've also supplied evacuation centers with hygiene kits, additional masks, any supplies that we get a hold of. And we also work with community groups with continuing to build that trust factor so that when people are in a position that they have to evacuate, they feel safe. A good example of that was during our Kincaid fire. The initial evacuation center was at Corazon Hillsburg, which is also an organization that deals with the Latinx community. And because they knew the center and we were there to represent and provide language access, 98% of those evacuees were Spanish-only monolingual vineyard workers, agricultural workers, H2A workers, and they all felt safe and comfortable there because we provided the right cultural welcoming committee. And that's what we need. We need to acknowledge the different groups, and all of these tactics or lessons learned with the Latinx apply to any vulnerable population. The reason seniors reach out to me is that I put my hand out to them in a way that makes them feel comfortable. And that I'm intentional. You have to be intentional. If you're wanting to reach a group, you can't throw out a really broad net and hope to catch them. You have to really figure out the avenues to reach the population. So one of our next phases, we're in the middle of doing some capacity building, which I'm so excited to say we're to this point. I'm bringing on some staff members. We just grew our office. We have 2 new programs, a mental health program that we're working on funding so that we can add a mental health component. And then we want to do a preparedness, a leadership academy for youth, where we're targeting Black, Latino, Asian, any ethnicity youth, not only to get them into disaster preparedness, but also I'm teaming up with the fire department, police department, ambulance companies to show them that there's this whole span of field. There's professions. You can become a firefighter. I was the only non-white dispatcher in that center for most of the time I was there. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but there was no outreach being done into communities to let them know that, hey, not only is this a career, for me, when I got that job, it helped me. I was a single mom. It changed my life to make that kind of money, have full benefits. And it was absolutely like, I stumbled on the job. I actually applied for it, didn't really understand what I was applying for it, tested for it. Thank the Lord I tested well, because I still didn't understand, and walked into the job the first day and not fully even understanding what I was going to do. But
I love that both you and Letitia stumbled onto like your moment to shine. I just have to note that sometimes in life you're like, what? And later,
yeah.
Oh, I love that. So
Yeah.
Lucy Bernard is coming on, and she's the head of the school district for Phoenix and Talent. She's done a remarkable job working on actually getting kids to school after they've had to leave their communities that were destroyed. So welcome to Lucy, by the way. Alma, can you, since I'm going to have the people ask you questions, but I just want to make sure that you get to, you've done so much in the last couple of years, like that lesson learned or a mistake that you made, or because we're trying to help, we want other communities to learn from us. We are not the experts in everything, but to say, if you need a Nuestra Comunidad in your community, like what are like some founding principles?
I have a whole PowerPoint, but I know we don't have the time. But one of my biggest lessons learned, and even as a Latino woman, was like, I always thought, if you're Latino, you're going to speak Spanish. And one of the biggest obstacles is for me was, and still trying to figure out the best way to engage, is that for our Latino community members, a lot of them are indigenous. And there are 288 variations of indigenous languages that come out of Mexico alone. And so connecting not only in the right indigenous language, but the right dialect of the indigenous language is such an obstacle that, as NC, being out in the community literally 4 or 5, 6 days a week, I'm still trying to figure that component out. So I think assuming that they're either that they're always going to be able to speak Spanish if they're Latino or from a Latin American country is a mistake. And until I really got into the boots on the ground work, I didn't realize how extensive the population is that speak indigenous languages, and most of them are just spoken. They're not even written. So when you're doing outreach like over social media, you can't like do a post in Triqui or Mixteco or Maya, or that doesn't exist. It has to be a spoken language. So finding groups to work with that can help you in that messaging is critical. And then also layering services, especially right now during COVID. We can't have as much, activity, obviously in person, especially in Sonoma County. We had such heavy restrictions, but there were certain things that were still happening in nuestra comunidad. The way we've been able to really shine, I think, is that we've capitalized on things already still happening, such as food distribution sites. Those were still happening regardless of COVID or not. They may have been drive-through instead of people walking up, but what we were doing is we were still putting out COVID information, giving out masks. Right now we're doing disaster guides, masks, NOAA radios, anything that we have our hands on. We partner with the food distribution sites, show up, and then as people are getting their food, they can also get whatever else you need to get to them. So being able to layer and capitalize on things that are already happening, that are already bringing the community. Sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. So you just have to be in the right place with whatever your message, your supplies, whatever you're giving, and reaching them. And it's forming that relationship. So it's not a one-time shot in the arm. You need to be present all the time so that you become a trusted messenger. Anybody that's in a municipal government needs to realize that during a disaster, they need to step aside and let the boots on the ground folks do the work.
Well, just in certain areas they do. Like, you wouldn't want me to be a dispatcher, and I'm a CBO.
No, I'm not talking about dispatchers.
But for certain functions, you can successfully partner with your community-based organizations, and to welcome that collaboration, because it will make a difference. And then to listen sometimes too, like, I am not criticizing our county, but I will say that they have a lot of challenges over the last 4 years, like crazy challenges. But it's good for them to hear that they should do PSAs on KBBF, the only radio station that has indigenous languages and is all in Spanish, because radio is a great way to reach a wider swath of the Latinx community. Seniors want a phone call. They don't. So just like to listen just to those little things. I just wanted to make sure that we were keeping it, clean.
No, I'm talking about like FEMA. If FEMA shows up, people run. So that's what I'm talking about, So if FEMA's here providing services, yeah, they're here. Obviously, they're going to have the bigger supplies. But what has been effective is when they allow for the smaller organizations or the local organizations that people know to also be visible during those times, because that's what brings that trust in. I literally saw it at the different centers where if it's all FEMA and they're driving up and that's what they're seeing, they were turning right back around and leaving. And so, yes, we need them. It's a collaborative effort, but I think that when they allow for that collaboration and that understanding that certain organizations already have the relationships and they can actually leverage that to their favor, it just gets the services and that are needed by the community are better received by community members. But I think we're still learning a lot of lessons, and I think we've taken some huge steps forward as a county since 2017. There's been so much growth. And, with 4 fires in, I hope that we're using all that experience, to continue to refine our processes and our lessons learned. And then also sharing them. Like, this platform is really exciting to me because sharing ideas or even resources, as Nuestra Comunidad, I have actually been being contacted by out of the area, either people that have gone through fires or just other experiences, to find out like what have we learned, what are things that they can implement. So I'm very open to sharing any experiences. There is a research paper that I have. I can probably email it to you. I worked with Stanford University, and they did an entire research project on best practices to reach vulnerable populations and Latinx, and we were part of that study. And so there was already a lot of really good lessons learned that we can share with communities that are needing that information right now.
Oh, Lucy read the study. Oh, Lucy, that's so great. Our superpower is we suggested Alma for the study. So, I mean, she's featured, and like on page 1, there's a big thank you and a well-deserved, well-earned. There's also another message here. Like if you see a hole that you can fill and a gap that needs to be done, get in there. Don't be afraid to get in there. If you have a good heart and you want to work hard, you're willing to listen to the community and meet them where they're at, which is what both of you have said in some way, shape, or form. You can be a huge asset to your resiliency, recovery, rebuilding, all of those things. So questions for Alma? Go ahead.
Well, again, yeah, you're to be commended. I think this is just incredible. I was curious though, when you mentioned about kind of zeroing in or being intentional in your outreach. It seems to me that at some point there needs to be the net thrown, and then if there's some sort of response, then you can be intentional. Is that kind of how that would work?
Yes, and I think what I mean by intentional is if let's say I'm trying to reach the Latino community in Santa Rosa, I'm going to look at the demographics first. I'm going to go pull up the census. I'm a numbers girl. I'm kind of a geek, behind closed doors. I look at information the best that I can. It's not always going to be accurate from paper to reality, but I know like in 95407, which is the most heavily impacted COVID area, it's also 98% Latinx community that lives there. So if I'm looking for a Latinx community, then you want to be strategic. If you have data somewhere that you can find that's going to show you, or if you have community leaders. One of my first avenues that's worked out to this day is I've connected with local community groups. So like Roseland has a CBI community-based initiative. South Park has another group, a CBI, a community-based initiative. So what happens when you can tap into certain groups that already exist is that those groups normally have at least one leader within the group. There is an outreach model called promotores or promoters. It's based out of health promoters or promotores de salud, but it really can be like teenage kids. If you want to talk about excessive video game usage, who are going to be your ambassadors for that message? You find people from within a group, a community that you want to work with, that you want to target, and then you figure out who are the leaders already with that. So right now I've developed and I'm helping train a whole group of promotoras. There's one promotor, so I should say promotoras and promotores, promoters around vaccine hesitancy. So these are people that already are looked at as leaders that are very involved within the community. So me working with them, equipping them with the information, with the flyers, with extra masks, with sanitizers, with all the things, and then letting them go out to do what they're naturally prone to do already is a really great model. It's a great way to work. So part of it, yes, you can cast a net. If you don't have any data, any information to show you how to get to the population you're wanting to get, then you can definitely do a wider net and then see if you get any bites. But if you can find data or even groups within a community that kind of guide you to finding where that community sector is, that's going to cut down some of the time that it's going to take you to get to that community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions? I do want to remind everyone that in 2017, Letitia had the experience in 2015 in Lake County. We watched in horror in 2015 what happened to Lake County, never understanding that what our reality would become 2 years later. None of us knew about disaster. We didn't know what a WUI was. We didn't know how to, we didn't even know how to properly serve the diversity in our own community for the most part. Where I live, where in Iko Sophie lives like 2 blocks from me, it's about 52% Latino. And so, and I sit on the board of the local resource center, La Luz. La Luz had to learn. We just partnered with them to figure out how to serve the community here exactly where they're at, which meant that we even had to change like how we did food delivery on like day 4 of a really intense 10 days. The first 10 days were particularly awful. And, on day 4, I learned a better way to actually deliver food, which was fresh food packets like dried beans, tomatillos, onions, carrots in a quart bag. And we had to make fresh meal kits because people could cook at home and they were afraid of ICE, not, as in immigration. The head of immigration got onto national TV during our fires and said that they were started by an undocumented person, which was patently false. So it made them more scared to come out. But we found that if we pushed the information out through, we could do all of the work with Rotary, amazing. We could do all this work with them to get the food and gather the food, and we can set up distribution points. But if we wanted people to actually come out, they would only listen to La Luz out here or the churches. And so it was just meeting people where they're at and then being open to new information and, and then learning our way through. I never knew before 2000, and really COVID really taught me the most about KVBF, even though we'd given them, during Kincaid, we gave them a grant for all of their work. But I just want to always emphasize that, we are all learning our way through this, and it's an entirely human experience, and you're going to make mistakes. And then also you might just stumble into your career of 25 years, your really cool, Nuestra Comunidad nonprofit, because that's where it put you. But you have to be sort of open to surfing into that moment, and that can be really scary sometimes.
Yeah, there's times I still can't believe that this is actually a thing. When I first went to my husband to tell him, hey, honey, I want to quit this great career and start this thing that I don't really even know. Like, we'll figure it out as we go. I thought he was going to be like, are you nuts? But he actually had the opposite reaction. And he said, I know you and you're going to do it anyway. So let's do it, So it worked out, but I still can't believe, because I've never worked harder than I work right now. I'm honest with you in this moment that it's practically a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week. I have to be intentional about taking time off from me and my family. But I love every minute of it because it feels like it's real work. And like Jen said, we're all learning, and, we're all moving with it, and that's a really good feeling to be responsive in that way.
It also will allow you all more room to be brave. It's true though, like if you know that people around you are also learning, it allows you to be more forgiving when people make errors, more accepting of their ability to correct, and more brave to do bigger things, like train a bunch of people to do really cool careers in solar and HVAC and everything else, because you're like, oh, actually the moment is calling for me to actually be this brave. And if I have good people all around me and who are willing to allow me to stumble if I need to, but they get the intention that you can actually make it all the way through. So okay, with that, I'm actually going to end us at 3:13 today. I want to thank all of you who made it today, especially our guest speakers, Letitia Hankey and Alma Bowen. We have sent their contact information is in their bios. If you want us to connect to you, we're happy to do that. And just thank you so much for spending some of your time with us and being, and sharing this really crazy experience that we're all living. So thank you.